Are you ready, Jaya? But you can't stand in front of the speaker. How about a warm welcome for Jaya? All right, we have an operator on deck.
Aloha, kako. Mahalo Aloha for being here. I am going to talk about the importance today of restoring our native forests and understanding local lowland plant species and plant dynamics to long-term sustenance in Hawaii. So thank you for having me. I want to start by telling you that a very exciting project is about to launch. The Keauohana Forest Reserve, which is just a few miles up the road here near Black Sands subdivision, is going to be restored over the next year, thanks to the state grant and aid program, as well as some county contingency funds that have come through. So I'm very excited. It's a very large moment for me. I've been working toward it for some years. So, there's going to be a volunteer component to this project, and on every third Saturday of the month, there will be a volunteer day for those of you who want to learn about native forest species and who want to partake in a very important project that is to protect the largest and most intact lowland native forest that we have remaining in the entire state of Hawaii. So I hope to see many of your shining faces over there. All right. So my goals today, besides hoping to recruit people for this fabulous project, is to promote a greater public awareness of lowland native plant species and plant issues in Puna. I'd like to support the control of invasive species that have an overbearing effect on native plant communities, and I'd like to support a healthy, dynamic environment that holds both wild and cultivated components. I have a farm in Kapoho. I've been there for 23 years, growing organically, growing a little bit of everything, and I'm all about sustainability. And there are ways in which we could utilize invasive species to help sustain us. But right now, we have a personal sustainability and we have a larger perspective sustainability when it comes to protecting our forests. Our native forests are of utmost importance in terms of long-term sustenance. All right. So I'd like to go ahead and clarify the distinction between native species, Polynesian introduced species, non-native species, and invasive species. I think it's a very important thing for people to become aware of, the general public to become aware of, residents to become aware of, and to support. So I will go through and give examples of these, of a number of common species for each one of these categories. So let's start with native species. What are native species? Native species are species that were brought here by forces other than human. That is, ocean currents, wind currents, birds, essentially. And we have indigenous species as well as endemic species. The difference between them is that indigenous means that they are found elsewhere on the planet, whereas endemic means they are not. It means they have evolved here. And that makes Hawaii a very special place and a very important place in the global community in terms of biodiversity. Biodiversity being a very important component to sustainability. Diverse forests, not monocultures and not a complete desert of IV. So let's just go over a few examples of native species that can be found in the lowland wet forests. I think most of us are very aware of the native ohia. It is our most dominant species, not only in lowland wet forests, but throughout the island chains at all elevations. So the ohia is very prized and culturally, and it's just important on all levels. Other than ohia, we have subcanopy species such as kopiko, which is very primary in lowland wet forest, and llama. This is a baby llama over here, and kolea. These are this is a small tree. They're very beautiful. They have a nice magenta leaf when they're first coming out. Let's go to the next. We also have a huge amount of ferns, and I'm not going to name them all. There's a lot of species we're not going to cover today, but the hapu'u is one of our primary subcanopy species. We have the pu'u and the pu'u and a very important plant in our forests. So feel free to plant a lot of it. And we have species such as Vandembotia, which is a good native ground cover. It's always a good indication when there's some around of the native component and potential for an area. We have Ama'u and Uluhe. I think a lot of you have seen Uluhe because it's quite dominant. Now, the thing about Uluhe, it appears to be quite invasive, but be rest assured that it is not. It is a long-term compatible early succession species. It starts in early ohia forests. You'll see it. Ohia, uluhe. They work together. And eventually, the ohia creates a canopy layer and shades out the uluhe, and other native species can come in, hopefully. Not invasive species. All right, so now let's go forward here. So we also have, in terms of ferns, we have the ekaha, also known by many of you as the bird nest fern. It's an epiphyte that likes to be in trees high up in the canopy layer. High canopy, so over canopy, yeah. Here we have the alahe'e and the akia, other common lowland species, native forest species, but they could also be planted in your gardens. They're all very pretty. And mamaki, speaking of a very important plant to have in your gardens, mamaki is, I hope you all know, very important in terms of its medicinal value, and it is a lovely, it actually is quite competitive against invasive species because it grows fast and it creates a shade layer for other plants to nurse underneath. This is one of my favorites, the ie. It's a climbing vine that whenever it's around, it always makes me smile because it means that there's some good potential for native forests in this area. Other species, I'm going to go over them briefly. Just the ule, morning glory, alabai nui, and of course our famous maili, and uki grass is also native. All right, here are some of the lowland coastal species. There's hala. Hala is a very important native species to protect, as well as milo and naupaka. They are our common species. There are more, but just to familiarize yourself with plants that you could feel good about planting and protecting. here are some rare species you will rarely come across. And we are, although there's some good efforts going on to restore forests and to reintroduce these plants into the lowland region, thanks to Dr. Ann Cops over here, who has a very important nursery going on in Kapoho. We have the ohe, the loulu, and the hame. These are rare species that are always a blessing to come across. And finally, I would like to just point out that the endangered species ha'ivale is also a very important plant in Kea'ohana Forest Reserve, particularly because it doesn't exist anywhere outside of Puna. That's why it's endangered. That's why it's important. Protecting Kea'ohana Forest Reserve means we are protecting, we are offering, we are stabilizing habitat for this endangered species, which means a lot in terms of biodiversity. All right. So let's spend a little time on Polynesian introduced species, very important plants to our sustenance and to the cultural Hawaiian cultural practices. The early Polynesians, the early Hawaiians, brought from 40 to 50 different species that were very important to their livelihood. And we profit from that today. They're part of our environment. A lot of people believe they're native. That's fine, because they might as well be. They're very important to us. And for the most part, what the Hawaiians brought here are non-invasive species, which is nice. A lot of them, some of them have naturalized. That means that they can be found in the wild, in the forest, there are a couple species that have a little bit of an aggressive tendency, such as hau and kukui, but for the most part they're quite benign. And so we have the hau, the mountain apple, the noni, the tea, and we have in the forest you can also come across ulu once in a while, and bamboo, and we have the kukui, like I said, and let us not forget the ava, very important plant here at Uncle Robert's. All right, and then that's a picture of the kamani tree, which you will find along the coast as well. Now let's talk about non-native species. All introduced plants were brought here by humans. All introductions were brought here by humans. They're also otherwise known as exotic species or alien species. Now, there is over 8,000 species that have been brought here since Europeans arrived. And of those, perhaps 1,000 have naturalized in the wild. But of those, perhaps only 100 of them are invasive species. And that's a very important thing to know. Not all non-native plants are invasive. And they can be accommodated, they can be integrated into our homesteads. But please be aware of the invasive species. The invasive species. Invasive species have a degrading effect on native forests. They tend to replace native plants rather than coexist with them. That's why they are a problem. They were brought here for aesthetic or commercial purposes, not knowing what the effects of naturalization. One of the underlying problems in the state of Hawaii is that there's a lack of importation law enforcement and monitoring of new species. This is a major problem that has been going on for a very long time, and it persists, unfortunately. So we are really good about exportation. Nothing goes out of this state without really severe inspection. But that's not true about the other way around, and that obviously needs to be changed. So unfortunately, issues of invasion are often responded to way beyond when it's possible to eradicate or eliminate them. Our only option is to control them, and with large infestations, you know, the best approach is to go from the outside in, and that includes invasive species such as albizia. We have core infestations of albizia all over the place. What are we doing while, why are we allowing baby albizia to start up in new places all along the road when we know what the future holds for that area? It's been going on after year after year after year. And the albizia are fast growing, and they're taking advantage of our, whatever you want to call it.
Hospitality.
Aloha.
I think it's apathy.
Complacency.
Complacency, that's right, thank you. So, are we at the next? Oh, you went ahead. Okay, let's see. Well, I was going to make this a trick question, but I guess it's not going to be too tricky. What is the most dominant species? The second most dominant species in the state, in the lowland wet forest, what is it? It is. It's Vivee. Ohia makes up about 44% of our canopy cover in the forests here. That's great. It's still the dominant species. Right behind it, we have Vivee at 32%. Now, this means, for those of you who are attached to Vivee, well, let me rest assure you that there will always be plenty of Vivee for you, even if we started an industry to chip away at the Vivee and incorporate the chips into our gardens so that we can have more biomass, and along with the albizia, of course. So here we have the Vivee. It is a problem, and and like yourself, the pigs, you know, they're fine with strawberry guavas if there's nothing else around. But I just want to point out that, you know, in case you haven't noticed, the pig population is expanding exponentially. And if you are all about self-sustainability, then you'll know that your uala and your tapioca are in danger. Speaking of invasive species, we need to support our local hunters and to help us, you know, with managing all of our precious resources adequately. And it does entail a significant diminishment in its population. I myself, you know, hunt, and I don't have to go very far because they're in my yard. So I kill them and I eat them. And if I didn't, they would be eating my roots, right? So that's how sustainability could work around here. All right. Okay, where are we? Next slide, please. So obviously we all know the albizia. Let's keep going so I don't go over my time. Another very problematic species in lowland wet forests is the Clydemia hirta. This is one of the main pests that we'll be dealing with in Keau'ohana Forest Reserve as well as Vivee. And just to list a few other species that are invasive, among many others that are not going to be listed today, is the Myconia, Cecropia, Melokia, all of which can be utilized in our sustainable measures. You know, we just need to be organized. Somebody needs to be smart and start an industry. So now we have the Melastoma, the African tulip, we have the Medinilla, and the octopus tree. Those are species you can feel good about plucking. If they're starting in new areas, you know what that area is gonna look like in a few years. So, not only in your gardens, not only do you want to support your neighbors in terms of being aware of what is going on in the long term, but I don't think it really makes a lot of sense to wait for county and state workers to deal with invasive species along the roads or in lowland regions in general. It would be nice if there would be some trained technicians to take care of invasive species and to know how to. There's really good strategies to take care of these creatures, and we just need to be on the same page. So we have the macaranga. You can keep going. Those are two different species of macaranga. They're found very prolifically. I'm sure you've noticed the macaranga that's between Pahoa and Hilo. It's all along the road there. We have ironwood, and we have the clusia, which is the autograph tree, ginger, lantana, Christmas berry. These are all species that you do not want to plant. Hopefully that becomes common knowledge. So what we want is a forest that looks something like that right there. There's a really big difference between a healthy forest and a non-healthy forest, between a native forest and a non-native forest. A forest that is a native forest sustains abundant life forms, and a forest that is non-native is essentially depleting that abundance. If you look at 5e, nothing grows next to it, nothing grows underneath it. It is taking over a lot of creatures. So if we know Hawaii's landscape history, which we all, if we live here, need to know, we understand that these lands were once covered with native varieties of flowers and ferns, were carpeted with green mosses, and bursting at the seams with life forms found nowhere else on the planet. Now we're talking about, invasive species, besides humans, of course, that have developed all the lowlands. We have ungulates that we have brought here from the top down. We had the land was covered with forests, and now we have grasslands, we have cattle ranches, we have ungulates taking over the whole place, all the way down to the ocean where the pigs are. Okay, so what are some of the things we can do? Well, first of all, maybe know your plant species. Be open to learning about what your environment holds. Do not plant known invasive species, please. That is first and foremost. Plant native plants to add aesthetic biodiversity to your gardens and to help replace weed infestations. The thing about I lost the train of thought there. But the main thing is we want to prevent future invasions by targeting invasive outliers. So if you have beginning colonies in your backyard, please, replace them with something that can be more productive in the long run. The nice thing about, the way we can contribute is that lowland forest species can be integrated into our environment, our personal environments, and then the birds help us, and the animals help spread it, and all of a sudden you have seeds popping up everywhere that are native rather than invasive, and it can become a process that really supports the native forest ultimately. All right, so learn the most effective ways to deal with individual species. It doesn't work to cut a species. It will usually come back tenfold. What you want to do is either pull it or poison it. Now, I am an organic farmer. I do not like poison, and I do not use it on my homestead. There's a place for it in eradication measures. And for me, it's like if it's a localized and you're just dealing with the plant itself, it's not spraying. If you have one little bottle of Garland 4, it takes care of a lot of species. You cut that creature, just give it a drop or two. You don't have to touch the poison, and it doesn't have to affect other plants around. So it is a localized solution that, works really well. And if you can't pull it by hand, which is always best, to pull it by hand and to create compost out of it, if you're dealing with large infestations, learn how to, do it strategically. All right. And again, share your mana'o with your neighbors and friends. Those are all important things that can be done. So for general weeds, yes, compost piles work really well. As long as you create enough heat, you can kill a seed. If you're concerned about not killing the seed, you can make compost tea, and that'll kill the seed if you want to, take that extra measure. If we properly manage, as we talked about already, albizia and strawberry guava hold an invaluable key to sustainable measures for our homesteads. So, due to sheer volume, the chipping can be utilized to enhance production. And just know that you do not, with albizia, it's a nitrogen fixer, right? So it actually, if you don't have a chipper and you don't have the resources for a chipper, you can just coppice your albizia trees and keep them twice a year, coppice them to mulch your trees, and they will eat that up very happily, and that'll be a very mutual symbiotic relationship. With the albizia as well, because we're talking about some massive, trunks. They could be utilized in hugelkultur, which is actually something that we should really all be raving about, because you can utilize all that biomass without chipping it. You can just lay it down with the smaller layers above it, cover it with a lot of soil, and you have yourself a sustainable garden that you probably won't even need to water, let alone fertilize. It will take care of a lot of species that you would like to have for a very long time. The bigger, the better. So, hugelkultur, look it up. I do have some pamphlets over there. If people want to, come by, Malama Opuna booth at the very end over there for more information about all of this. So, let's see. Okay, well, and so there's a lot you can do, right? And I just want to invite you as well to, if you want to, please become part of the enthusiastic crew that's going to be doing restoration work at Keawa Ohana beginning this coming month. Oh, okay. So this is an invaluable opportunity for people to come together, experience meaningful and purposeful community project, as well as protect a very unique and rare habitat and that holds numerous native plant species and rare plant species. So we'd love to see you there. It would be really wonderful. If you are interested in that or in any of this, please come talk to me. You could also email me at dupuis.hawaii.edu. And thank you so much for your kind attention today. Thank you for being here. And if there's any questions, I guess I have a little bit of time to respond, or we can talk story a little bit if you're interested. Otherwise, mahalo nui loa. Thank you for being here. Any questions?
What's the solution to the lack of people who are checking the invasive species coming in? Why do we not have enough?
I'm not very good on bureaucratic levels, but
I'm kind of missing your post.
but it is a
See him on
bureaucratic
Facebook
issue.
and
And if you become like a councilman or something, you might have like more possibility potential in that area, and I would really like to support that. You know, we all do. Okay, well, time out. Mahalo.
Thank you, Jaya. Great job. Wow. That was so much information. And so talk to her if you want to become part of the crew to help go into the forest and restore it. Anybody interested in that? Show of hands. Anybody? Look, Jaya. Look at these people. Connect with them and get a sign-up sheet. Get that going. It's great. Awesome. So Robert Jr. was going to do a talk on the rocket stove.